So you might have noticed that over the past few months, I've not been particularly active on social media and here on YouTube, and it's been with good reason. So let me explain. This past 12 months for me and for a lot of you guys has been an extremely difficult time. Like a lot of you guys, I lost my job, I lost my apartment, I lost my entire way of living, but these past 4 months have been something else. I do want to share with you guys what has been going on from the start of this channel. I've always wanted to be open and honest with you about what has been happening with me. So I am going to share with you what's been happening over the past few months, but I do still consider this my private life. And so I'm not going to go into all the details about what's been going on. So in December, my partner's grandmother unfortunately passed away. She was well into her 90s and her health was suffering, so it wasn't completely unexpected, but it was still very sad and a difficult thing to deal with. Then in March, just a few months later, her father sadly passed away after a difficult battle with cancer. He'd been told about a month previous that his treatment was no longer working and his health deteriorated rapidly. Fortunately, his immediate family, including myself, were there and he died peacefully in the night. Then, just 2 weeks after his death, we had to say goodbye to our best friend and put Manson to sleep. He'd developed heart failure and was really now suffering with his breathing. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but we had to do what was right for him. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone that's shown us support over the past few months. It's been really tough, but you've all helped in your own way. And to all you guys that didn't know what's been going on, that's why we've been away from social media, we've been off YouTube, we've just been grieving and dealing with these difficult events. I want to give a special thank you to the VDVLA. You guys know who you are. I don't think we would have got through this without you. You guys have been amazing and absolute lifesavers for both Kerry and me, so thank you. I'm not telling you guys this to make you feel sorry for me. This isn't some big woe is me trip or anything like that. I just always want to keep you guys informed about what has been happening and to say thank you to everyone that has supported us and sent us messages over this difficult few months. So with that out of the way and explained why I've been away from YouTube, I thought a really good way for me to get back into things would be to answer some of the questions that you guys have been asking on YouTube. I do try and read all the comments and questions that you guys send me, and I do try to respond to each and every single one of them, but I thought doing an actual Q&A video might be useful for some of you guys who might have the same questions. So I've just grabbed a handful of questions that you guys have asked from various different videos and just go through. Peter Venkman asks, awesome name by the way. Let's say I made a preset with an IR. Now I want to make a new one, so I load a new bunch of IRs to choose from. Do I have to keep the IR from the first preset that I made on the list? Can I move that IR in the list, or it has to stay exactly in the same place it was when I created the preset? So there he's talking about using impulse responses in Helix presets. When you create a preset within the Helix and you use IRs, the IR block points to an IR contained in the IR list. So say you created a preset and you used IR number 30, whatever impulse response is loaded into your IR list in slot number 30 is the IR that preset is going to reference. So if you change the IR that's in slot number 30, even without doing anything to the Helix preset itself, it will then reference that new IR that's in that slot. So yeah, if you wanted the preset to keep working as it was, you would need to keep that IR in its original slot. If you did want to move the IR to a different slot, all you would have to do is then go into the preset, into the IR block, and point that IR to the correct slot in the IR list. Then save the preset and it would still work. Daniel Cantrell asks, I've been messing around with different methods and this one works the best with my 5153 100 watt. Great amplifier. What is the best global setting for this method? Quarter out and send and return. Should I have both set to line or instrument? So Daniel here is talking about the 4 cable method with the Helix. And according to line 6, the best way to do this is to set everything to instrument level. That way the Helix is acting just like real pedals would. Both effects that you send in pre-amplifier and any effects that you have in the effects loop. So yeah, set everything to instrument. Chris Pemberton asks, when the channel strips are in the insert, they are legacy version, so they use less DSP as opposed to Unison slots, which utilizes full preamp section, more DSP. So Chris is talking about UAD plugins, And the answer is no, not necessarily. Legacy versions of the UAD plugins are their own separate standalone thing. I'm not entirely sure of the DSP implications of using a UAD preamp in the insert instead of using it in a Unison slot. But if you do need to save DSP, then those legacy versions are a really great way of doing it. And they are their own standalone version of each plugin. So for example, like the 1073 preamp, there is a full fat version of it with the Unison preamp, and there's a legacy version of it. The plugins do sound different, but if you are struggling for DSP, those legacy versions are a really great way to go. John Barlow asks, what model and year is your Les Paul? Are they stock pickups? And what was the recording chain? Thanks for the question. This is from my Sweet Child of Mine tone video. The Les Paul in question is this one. It is a 2009 Traditional Pro 2, I think. It has the stock classic 57 pickups, and the recording chain was Les Paul into UAD Arrow interface, into Helix native, running in whatever DAW it was that I was using at the time. M Drummer asks, how do you do that note in Walk This Way, like squeaky high pitch? Thanks for the question. That's from a really old video on my channel where I was doing the top 10 Les Paul riffs. And I think the sound that you're referring to there is called a pinched harmonic. It's a technique where you're picking a string and muting with the flesh of your thumb at the same time, and it creates this amazing sounding harmonic. There are loads of videos here on YouTube on how to do it with really cool close-up cameras showing you exactly what your thumb needs to do. And if you really want to see what you can do with pinched harmonics, check out some of Zach Wilde's playing. Apologies if I get this next name wrong, but Abner Azevedo Music asks, can I plug mics into my HX Stomp and record a real drum with mics? No, unfortunately not really with the HX Stomp. It doesn't have any XLR inputs on it, which you would need to record microphones. You could definitely do it with the big Helix floorboard, as they do have XLR inputs. I've been in a situation before where we had no mixing desk available on a gig, and I had to use my big Helix as the mixer, so we had microphones along with guitars, and because you can have 4 separate audio lanes, it meant that we could have different effects on each one, all mixed and sent out left and right of the Helix. So no, unfortunately, I don't think you could do it with HX Stomp, but you can definitely do it with the bigger Helix. Will Hall asks, just curious, how much does all of that weigh? That's from my Line 6 backpack video. And the last time I did weighed was when I was flying from Mallorca to Ibiza, and I think the weight of it was 16 kilos. That was with the Helix, my breakout board, which has the wah, the wireless, and a compressor on there. It also had a few extras in there, like spare batteries and wireless packs and things like that. And it all came around to that 16K mark. DC says, I've just given Luna a solid go and absolutely love the Neve summing. Me too. However, I found it rather unstable when using third-party plugins like FabFilter and Waves. I have a very capable Mac and plenty of DSP with the latest UAD hardware, but after spending a day on a mix, it seems to have crashed so hard that the session no longer works, even after rebooting. How have you found the stability? Well, that sucks that you're really having problems with Luna. For me, I seem to have been fairly lucky with how stable my system is. Just so you know what I'm running, I have a 2016 MacBook Pro. I'll put the specs here. It really is starting to show its age now though, and Luna pushes it really hard. The majority of the time when I'm mixing a session in Luna, the fans are maxed out on this laptop now, but I've had very few crashes. In fact, I think I've only had one, and that was last week. Just as I was about to track a vocal, Luna completely quit on me. I had to do a full restart, but it booted straight back up, straight into the session, and carried on no problem. As far as third-party stuff goes, I really haven't had any problems with those either. I haven't experienced the UI problems that a lot of people are getting with Waves, but I understand that the Waves technical support are doing a lot to help people with that issue. FabFilter has worked flawlessly for me. The only one problem I've had with any third party has been Melodyne. It all seems to work fine when I'm doing pitch adjustments, but when it comes to render, it's full of artifacts. So the only workaround I've found is to do my pitch adjustments and then bounce out that single piece of audio, re-import it back into the track, disable Melodyne, and then everything's fine. Luna is definitely the way forward for me. I am 95% in Luna now. I only need Studio One for the odd few things that are still a bit easier to do in Studio One or that Luna doesn't do. And once UAD and Luna has M1 support, I'll be switching to one of the new Macs and I'll probably be 100% in Luna. Eric Max Navaretti, apologies again if I get that name wrong, says, where can I download the impulse responses? That's from my Where the Streets Have No Name video. All the impulse responses I use with all my Helix patches and pretty much everything I do on this channel are from 3 Sigma Audio, and I'll put links in the description to their website where all the impulse responses can be downloaded. Rdog asks, where would a looper go to catch both paths? This is from the 4-cable method with the Helix. So there's a number of different places you could put a looper when you're doing a 4-cable method. If you want to just capture the dry signal from the guitar before it hits any pedals, it would go in front of the Helix, so straight after the guitar. That way the signal coming out of the looper would hit every pedal, the amp, and every pedal in the effects loop. If you wanted to capture all the preamp effects, so your drives and things like that, and then feed into your effects loop effects, you could put it after all your drive and compression pedals, right before it hits the front end of the amp. If you want the looper to record everything that's in your signal chain, you'd put it right at the end as though it was your very last pedal. So you'd be coming from the effects loop into all the pedals that you want in the loop, and then from the Helix to your looper, and then back to the effects return. That way it would capture everything that you've got in the signal chain before feeding back into your amplifier. Personally, my favorite way to do it would be to have it at the start of my pedals in the effects loop. So I would have my signal feeding into my Helix through all my compression and drive pedals, into the front end of the amp, then from the effects send into the looper, then all my time-based effects and modulations and things like that, and then back to the amplifier. That way the looper's recording all the drive and compression from the amp and my pedals, but it's just feeding that signal into all my modulations and time-based effects. That way when you're recording loops, you won't get things like cutting off reverb tails or delay tails. And the last question comes from Vethuleon. I think that's right. Again, apologies if I'm getting these names wrong. They say, I would like to know how transparent the Helix is. I used to play 4-cable method with a few multi-effects in the past, and every one of them just gives some color to the sound. I would say some kind of hiss mid-tone. Also, can you change channels in the amp via MIDI? And that's from the 4-cable method with the Helix. From my experience, the Helix seems to be the most transparent unit I've ever tried to use with 4-cable method. In the past, I used to have a TC, the big one, what was that called? The TC G system. I think it was called the G system, the really big one, and it was the buffered one, the IB buffered one that I had. And from my personal experience with the setup I was using that with at the time, that seemed to suck a load of top end out of my amplifier. When I've done traditional 4-cable method with pedals, you do lose a bit of something depending on how many pedals you have, how long a cable runs you have, whether you're running buffered and things like that. But with the Helix, it seems to be pretty much what you put into it is what comes out of it. That kind of tone suck seems to be pretty much non-existent. From my experience anyway, I've done 4-cable method with a few amps now with the Helix, and I've not really noticed any change in tone. As far as changing channels with the Helix goes, I only have very limited experience with this. I've tried to use the Helix to change the channels on my V30. Unfortunately, for some reason, it introduces a load of hiss on the clean channel. The channel switching does work and you can assign it to any of the switches that you want, but on that clean channel, there's this noise that you just cannot get rid of. I've tried using hum eliminators and all kinds of different cables and all things like that, and it just won't disappear. You can even hear it in one of the videos that Andertons did with Paul Highmarsh from Line 6 when the Helix was just announced. And they had the same setup with a V30 and a Helix, and you could hear the noise on the clean channel. As for doing it with MIDI, I've not tried this yet. I do have my big Marshall, which is MIDI capable, so maybe I'll give this a try in the future. And I believe it'd be a fairly straightforward process, setting up the various MIDI control changes and then assigning it to whichever switches that you want. So there you go, guys. I hope that has answered some of the questions that you guys have been asking me in the comments to my previous videos. Thank you so much for asking all the questions that you guys are asking on these videos. Do keep the questions coming and I will try to answer as many as possible. And I'll perhaps make a Q&A video once a month so that everybody can see all the answers to the questions that you guys ask. I just want to say again, thank you to everyone that has shown us support over the past few months. We're doing good, we're dealing with things, and we're slowly getting back to some sense of normality. So thank you to every one of you. So that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up below. If you want to watch another video on my channel, you can do it just up here. Don't forget to subscribe. You can do it right there. I'll see you in the next one.